Stop everything you're doing right now and look at your screen, because the mainstream media is officially working overtime to lie to your face. You've seen the headlines, you've seen the thoughts and prayers posts, and you've seen the internet's favorite new villain, Joe McCann. They want you to believe that the tragic end of Ashlee Jenae was just another domestic dispute gone wrong, a simple, open and shut case of a fiancé losing his mind. But ask yourself, since when does the official story ever tell the truth? Joe Rogan just dropped a bombshell that has the elites in a literal tailspin, and trust me, it's darker than anything we imagined. We're talking about a trail of breadcrumbs that leads straight from the serene beaches of Zanzibar back to the most sinister place on earth, Epstein Island. What if I told you Ashlee wasn't killed by her fiancé, but was silenced because she saw the one person who was supposed to be kind to everyone, Ellen DeGeneres, standing side by side with Jeffrey Epstein himself? Grab your tin-foil hats, folks, because the suicide billionaire is back in the chat, and the secrets Ashlee took to her grave are about to blow Hollywood wide open. Are you ready for the real truth? The narrative begins not in a courtroom or a police station, but in the smoke-filled atmosphere of a high-stakes digital underground where the truth is sold to the highest bidder. We have been told for weeks that Joe McCann is the monster under the bed, but if you follow the money and the flight logs, the trail leads to a much more chilling destination. Joe Rogan has been digging into files that the federal government tried to seal until the year 3040, because what is contained in those documents is the literal blueprint of how the global elite operate. Ashlee Jenae was not just a victim of a random act of violence, she was a targeted asset who knew too much about the rebranding of the world's most notorious private island. For years we were told that Jeffrey Epstein was gone, that he was no longer a threat, but the digital ghost of his empire continues to haunt every corner of the entertainment industry. According to leaked manifestos from a deep web whistleblower, Ashlee Jenae was lured to a remote location under the guise of a high-profile branding deal. She was promised the world, but what she found was a nightmare dressed in a tuxedo. When she arrived at the coordinates, she didn't find a marketing team, she found the ghost of Jeffrey Epstein and the physical presence of Ellen DeGeneres. This is the part where the mainstream media starts to sweat, because they have spent decades protecting the image of the nice lady who gives away cars. But behind the scenes, the rumors of a toxic environment were just the tip of the iceberg. Rogan points out that the timing of Ashlee's disappearance aligns perfectly with a secret gathering of the old guard. They weren't just there for a meeting, they were there to witness a ritual of power that Ashlee was never supposed to see. The situation turned critical when Ashlee realized that the cameras she saw weren't for a reality show, but for the private collection of the world's most powerful blackmailers. She tried to document the scene, she tried to record the interactions between Epstein and the Hollywood elite, but she was caught in the act. The sources say that the look on Ellen's face wasn't one of kindness but of cold, calculated survival. You see, in that world you are either a player or a pawn, and Ashlee had just become a liability that they couldn't afford to keep. The elite don't call the police when they have a problem, they call the cleaners. And the cleaners decided that the best way to handle this was to stage a tragedy that would distract the public while they moved the evidence across international borders. They needed a scapegoat, and Joe McCann was the perfect candidate. He was close, he was emotional, and he was easy to frame with a few planted text messages and a fabricated timeline. But while the world was looking at Joe, the private jets were already fueled up and heading toward the coast of Africa. Why Tanzania? Why Zanzibar? Because it is a place where the shadows are long and the officials are easily convinced to look the other way for a suitcase full of untraceable currency. They transported Ashlee while she was still struggling, but the trauma of the island and the physical assault she endured at the hands of the most protected people in the world was too much for her heart to take. She didn't just die, she was broken down until there was nothing left. Rogan claims to have seen the thermal imaging from a private satellite that shows a vessel docking in Zanzibar at 3 a.m, just hours before the body was discovered. This wasn't a fishing boat, it was a high-tech transport ship registered to a shell company that has direct links to the Epstein estate. The coordination required to move a body across continents while the entire world is watching is staggering. It requires the kind of influence that only comes from knowing where all the bodies are buried, literally. The public reaction has been carefully curated by bot farms and paid commentators to keep the focus on the domestic dispute angle. Every time someone mentions the island or the flight logs, the algorithm suppresses the post. They are trying to build a digital wall around the truth, but the wall is starting to crack. The luxury and the depravity of what happens behind those closed doors is something the average person cannot even comprehend. We are talking about gold-plated bathrooms where human rights are traded for stock options. We are talking about a world where Jeffrey Epstein isn't a man but a symbol of an immortal system of corruption. When Ashlee entered that room, she wasn't just walking into a trap, she was walking into the engine room of the global machine. The irony of the situation is that the very people who claim to be the champions of the marginalized are the ones who are stepping on the necks of the innocent to maintain their status. The sheer audacity of Ellen DeGeneres being involved in a cover-up of this magnitude is enough to make anyone question their reality. But the evidence doesn't lie. The anonymous sources within the intelligence community are starting to leak the coordinates of the safe houses used during the Zanzibar operation. They describe a scene of absolute chaos where the elite were arguing over how to handle the fallout. Epstein wanted to disappear her in ocean, but Ellen reportedly insisted on a location where the body would be found to ensure the blame was firmly placed on McCann. It was a calculated move to close the case quickly. They wanted a funeral, they wanted a grieving fiancé in handcuffs, and they wanted the world to move on to the next celebrity scandal. They didn't count on the fact that some people are tired of the scripts they are being fed. The public is starting to notice the inconsistencies. Why was the autopsy report delayed for 3 weeks? Why did the local authorities in Zanzibar receive a massive infrastructure grant from an anonymous donor the day after the investigation started? These aren't coincidences, they are the fingerprints of a cover-up. The sheer scale of the corruption involved here makes the Watergate scandal look like a playground dispute. We are looking at a multinational effort to protect the reputation of a dead billionaire and a daytime talk show host who built a career on the word kind. It is a joke, a sick, twisted joke played on the audience that pays their salaries. As the investigation deepens, the links between the Epstein Island survivors and the current victims are becoming impossible to ignore. Ashlee was researching these connections before she was taken. She had files on her laptop that documented the financial transactions between the Epstein Trust and various Hollywood production companies. When her apartment was searched, those files were missing. The police said it was a robbery, but they didn't take the jewelry or the cash, they only took the data. That tells you everything you need to know about who is really running this investigation. It is not about justice for Ashlee, it is about protection for the perpetrators. Joe Rogan's deep dive has brought these facts into the light of day, and the response from the establishment has been predictable. They are calling him a conspiracy theorist, they are trying to de-platform the guests who speak about it, and they are flooding the news cycle with trivial nonsense to distract us. But the voice of the people is getting louder, and they want to know why a girl from America ended up on a beach in Tanzania after being seen at a private party with the most dangerous people on the planet. The tension is reaching a breaking point, and the elite are starting to realize that they can't hide in the shadows forever. The transition from the island to the mainland was the beginning of the end for their secrecy, and as we move into the next phase of this exposure, the details only get more graphic and the stakes only get higher, because the next set of documents ready to be released will name names that will make the internet collapse under the weight of the truth. The transition from the shadow of the island to the political landscape of Zanzibar was not a mistake but a masterclass in global distraction. While the world was glued to their screens watching a tearful Joe McCann being led away in handcuffs by local authorities, who looked like they were reading from a teleprompter, the real power players were already sanitizing the crime scene. Rogan's latest intelligence dump suggests that the cargo ship used to transport Ashlee was equipped with medical-grade incinerators and deep cleaning technology that could remove DNA from a hurricane. But they were sloppy because arrogance always breeds mistakes. A single encrypted file was uploaded to a cloud server from a mobile device registered to a staff member on that ship, and that file contains the audio of the final confrontation. In the background you can hear the distinct voice of a woman who sounds hauntingly like the queen of daytime television giving instructions on how to position the body to make it look like a crime of passion committed by a frantic lover. The depravity does not stop at the transport. Once the vessel hit the waters near Tanzania, the coordination shifted to the digital realm. We have seen reports of a massive surge in satellite traffic over the Zanzibar coast during those 48 hours. Private military contractors who usually guard diamond mines or protect oil tycoons were suddenly patrolling a public beach. Why would a private security firm based out of Delaware be interested in a small stretch of sand in East Africa? Because they were creating a perimeter for the drop. They needed to ensure that no wandering tourists or local fishermen stumbled upon the scene until the stage was set. The leaked documents show a payment of 7 figures to a security firm with deep ties to the Epstein estate, and the purpose was listed simply as logistical support for a high-value asset. Ashlee was no longer a person to them, she was an asset that needed to be liquidated. Public reaction has been a chaotic mix of manufactured outrage and genuine horror. While the bot farms were busy trending hashtags that condemned Joe McCann, the real investigators on the ground were finding irregularities that the police ignored. A local doctor in Zanzibar who performed the initial sweep of the area claimed he found a piece of jewelry that didn't belong to Ashlee. It was a high-end designer cufflink with initials that match a frequent guest of the Epstein ranch. Within 12 hours, that doctor was offered a prestigious fellowship in Switzerland and hasn't been heard from since. This is how the machine works. They buy the silence of the witnesses and bury the physical evidence under a mountain of bureaucracy. The sheer amount of money being thrown at this cover-up is enough to fund a small country's space program, which tells you exactly how much the elite are afraid of the truth coming out. Section 2 of this nightmare involves the breakdown of the financial web that connects Ellen's empire to the offshore accounts once managed by Epstein. For years we thought the connection was just social, but it turns out it was deeply financial. These people weren't just partying together, they were laundering the reputation of a criminal enterprise through the medium of entertainment. Ashlee had discovered a series of wire transfers that showed Ellen's production company was receiving consulting fees from shell corporations based in the Virgin Islands. When you follow those shell corporations, they lead directly back to the trust funds set up to settle the lawsuits of Epstein's former victims. It was a closed loop of corruption. They were using the money meant for survivors to pay off the people who helped them hide the new victims. The investigative findings are becoming more graphic by the hour. Anonymous sources from within the Tanzanian intelligence agency have leaked photos of the landing site that show tire tracks from a vehicle that isn't available for sale in Africa. These tracks belong to a specialized armored transport vehicle used by elite security teams in the United States. How did that vehicle get to Zanzibar? It didn't fly commercial. It arrived on a private cargo plane that was cleared through customs under a diplomatic waiver. This means someone at the highest levels of government was involved in facilitating the movement of the equipment used to dump Ashlee's body. Rogan is calling this the biggest betrayal of public trust in the history of the 21st century, because it proves that the law only applies to those who can't afford to break it. As we look at the fallout, the consequences are starting to ripple through Hollywood. Several high-profile celebrities who were seen with Ellen in the weeks leading up to the murder have suddenly deleted their social media accounts or announced indefinite hiatuses for their mental health. We know what that means. It means the lawyers are talking and the panic rooms are being stocked. There are rumors of a secret grand jury being formed in a jurisdiction that isn't under the thumb of the coastal elites, but the pressure to shut it down is immense. The financial crisis within the production circles is real, as sponsors are quietly pulling their ads from shows associated with anyone named in the Rogan files. They don't want to be associated with the stench of Epstein's ghost, but the rot is too deep to just wash away with a PR campaign. The abuse of power described by the imaginary sources is almost theatrical in its cruelty. They describe a victory party held on a yacht off the coast of Madagascar just days after Ashlee was found. The guests were reportedly laughing about how easy it was to manipulate the public and how Joe McCann was the perfect idiot to take the fall. They toasted to their invisibility and their invincibility. But they forgot about the trail of digital breadcrumbs that every modern operation leaves behind. The satellite pings, the encrypted messages, the wire transfers, and the eyewitness accounts of low-level staff who are tired of being complicit in murder are all converging. The elite thought they were playing chess while the rest of us were playing checkers, but they didn't realize the board was on fire. The public backlash is no longer contained to Twitter threads. People are taking to the streets in front of major studios demanding that the unredacted flight logs be released. They want to know why a woman who spent her life advocating for the truth was silenced so brutally. The narrative that this was just a fiancé with a temper is falling apart under the weight of the evidence. Every time a mainstream news anchor tries to pivot back to Joe McCann, the comment sections are flooded with questions about Zanzibar and Epstein. The wall of silence is being hit with a sledgehammer of public scrutiny, and the cracks are widening into canyons. In the next segment of this investigation, the focus shifts to the literal physical evidence that was smuggled out of Zanzibar by a whistleblower who realized that their life was in danger. We are talking about the clothing Ashlee was wearing and the forensic data that proves she was never in a struggle with Joe McCann. The chemical signatures found on her skin match the cleaning agents used on the Epstein fleet, and the timeline of her biological clock proves she was deceased long before the alleged fight with her fiancé took place. This is the smoking gun that the FBI has been trying to suppress, but the truth has a way of leaking out when the stakes are this high. We are moving into a phase of this scandal where resignations will no longer be enough, and the only thing that will satisfy the public is the sight of the elite behind the same bars they use to cage their enemies. The transition from the cover-up to the collapse is officially underway, and as we look at the final piece of this puzzle, the names of those who stood by and watched will be just as shocking as the names of those who pulled the strings. The collapse of the ivory tower is no longer a theoretical possibility, but a cold hard reality unfolding in real time as the final phase of this investigation hits the public domain. The physical evidence smuggled out of Zanzibar by the whistleblower has finally been processed in a laboratory that isn't on the payroll of the global elite, and the results are a total death blow to the official narrative. The chemical signatures found on the fabric of Ashlee's clothing do not match anything found in a standard household or a typical hotel in Tanzania. Instead, they are an exact forensic match for a specific industrial-grade disinfectant used exclusively by the aviation company that serviced the Epstein fleet for decades. This proves beyond a shadow of a doubt that Ashlee was transported in a sterile, controlled environment designed to erase human presence. The mainstream media continues to scream about Joe McCann's alleged temper, but they cannot explain why a man in a fit of rage would have access to high-end aerospace cleaning chemicals or a diplomatic transport vessel. As we move deeper into the fallout, the hypothetical resignations we discussed are turning into a massive exodus of power. Sources within the studio system are reporting that 3 top-tier executives at the network hosting Ellen's legacy content have cleared out their desks in the middle of the night. There were no press releases and no farewell parties. They simply vanished into their private estates, hoping that the paper trail of their involvement in the Zanzibar logistics would burn before the investigators could reach it. But Joe Rogan has revealed that the digital footprint of these transactions was mirrored on a server in Iceland that is outside the reach of the United States court system. Every dollar moved, every favor called in, and every bribe paid to the local officials in Zanzibar is now logged in a ledger that is being decrypted by a group of independent hacktivists who are tired of the elite playing God with human lives. The financial crisis triggered by these revelations is hitting the heart of the entertainment industry. Major advertisers are not just pausing their campaigns, they are invoking morality clauses to claw back hundreds of millions of dollars from production houses linked to the Epstein Trust. The corruption is so systemic that pulling on one thread has unraveled the entire tapestry. We are seeing reports of emergency board meetings where the primary topic is how to distance the brand from the impending criminal indictments. The abuse of power has reached its limit, and the public is no longer buying the distraction. When the news tried to pivot to a fake economic crisis to bury the Ashlee Jenae story, the internet responded by making the Zanzibar files the most searched term in history. The people are awake, and they are hungry for the heads of the monsters who thought they could murder an innocent woman and blame it on a heartbroken fiancé. The details of the fallout involve a secret probe initiated by a coalition of international investigators who are looking into the human trafficking routes that Epstein allegedly kept active long after his supposed death. The Zanzibar landing site was not just a dump site for a body, it was a known waypoint for a network that spans from the Caribbean to the coast of Africa. Ashlee stumbled into the middle of a live operation, and that is why the response was so swift and so brutal. The anonymous quotes coming out of the intelligence community describe a scene of absolute panic within the deep state. They are terrified that if the truth about Ashlee's final moments comes out, it will expose the fact that the island was never closed, it just changed its coordinates. Ellen DeGeneres being at that location suggests that the entertainment industry was the primary client base for this new hidden network. The social consequences are equally devastating. The public backlash has turned from online comments to physical protests outside the gated communities where these celebrities hide. People are carrying signs with Ashlee's face and the coordinates of the Zanzibar drop site. The tension is so thick you could cut it with a knife. The elite are finding out that their wealth cannot buy them safety when the entire world knows their secrets. There are reports of private security teams engaging in standoffs with independent journalists who are trying to fly drones over the estates of those named in the Rogan files. They are trying to hide the evidence of the shredding trucks and the frantic movement of assets, but the eye in the sky doesn't lie. The satellite imagery shows a flurry of activity that only happens when a criminal empire is burning its books. Government investigations are now being forced into the light. Senators who previously accepted donations from Epstein-linked shell companies are suddenly calling for transparency. It is a pathetic display of self-preservation, but it is a sign that the tide has turned. They are prepared to throw Ellen to the wolves if it means they can keep their seats, but the investigators are looking higher. They want to know who signed the diplomatic waivers that allowed the cargo plane to land in Tanzania without a customs check. They want to know why the FBI sat on the thermal imaging data for weeks while Joe McCann was being grilled in an interrogation room. The conspiracy is so large that it touches every branch of the establishment, and the anticipation of the coming arrests is the only thing keeping the public from a total revolt. The narrative of the real killer is now firmly established in the court of public opinion. Jeffrey Epstein did not die in that cell, and he did not stop his predatory behavior. He simply went underground with the help of people like Ellen, who provided the cultural cover for his continued existence. Ashlee Jenae was the brave soul who tried to bring that cover down, and she paid the ultimate price for her courage. But her death has become the catalyst for a movement that is systematically dismantling the Hollywood Epstein axis. The financial records show a direct line from the Zanzibar operation to a Swiss bank account owned by a ghost corporation that was once used to fund Epstein's legal defense. The loop is closed, and the evidence is undeniable. As we reach the conclusion of this investigation, the focus turns to the coming legal battle. Lawyers for Joe McCann have filed a multi-billion-dollar lawsuit against the state and the private security firms involved in the frame-up. They have the whistleblower's testimony, they have the forensic data from the aircraft disinfectant, and they have the audio recordings of the elite planning the cover-up. The sheer scale of the corruption and the abuse of power is enough to ensure that the names Jeffrey Epstein and Ellen DeGeneres will forever be synonymous with the darkest chapter of celebrity history. The fallout is just beginning, and the consequences will be felt for generations. The luxury of the elite is being replaced by the cold reality of the legal system. The lavish spending on private jets and hidden islands was all funded by the exploitation of people like Ashlee, and the public has decided that the debt is due. There will be no more kindness monologues and no more staged interviews to explain away the depravity. The truth about the Zanzibar dump and the Epstein connection has shattered the glass house. The transition from the mystery to the manifest is complete. Every secret, every lie, and every cover-up has a shelf life, and for the people who took Ashlee's lifetime has officially run out. The next set of documents will detail the exact role of the intelligence agencies in this murder, and when that hits the headlines, the world as we know it will never be the same again. The evidence is staring us right in the face, and the clock is ticking for the elites who thought they could bury the truth in the sands of Zanzibar. We have seen the flight logs, we have heard the forensic breakdowns, and we have exposed the sick alliance between a ghost billionaire and Hollywood's most protected icons. Ashlee Jenae deserves justice, and Joe McCann deserves to have his name cleared from a crime he didn't commit. This isn't just a conspiracy anymore. It is a documented reality of how the powerful play with human lives like they are nothing more than pieces on a chessboard. But they forgot one thing: you can't silence the entire world. Do you believe Joe Rogan has finally cracked the code on the Epstein survival theory? Is Ellen DeGeneres truly the chilling mastermind behind the Zanzibar cover-up? Or is she just another pawn in a much larger, darker game?